for anyone capturing the crew. Now, this social media video is said to show the U.S. search and rescue operation currently underway. This would be the first known loss of a jet inside Iran since the start of the war. Let's bring in DW's Janelle Jules-Milan, who's reporting on the situation for us from Washington. So, Janelle, what more information are we getting?
Sarah, of course, as you said, this is very, very serious news. But at the moment, there are very much more questions than answers that we have. And you can imagine that it will take some time for the full picture to emerge. But this is what we do know. This morning, the first report started coming out of Iran. State-affiliated media saying that a U.S. fighter jet was shot down over the country. They published those pictures and videos that you talked about, and those pictures and videos seem to indicate that we are talking about an F-15 fighter jet. So we have reached out to the administration for comment in order to ask around the exact details of this incident, to ask about the crew, to ask about search and rescue operations. But we have yet to receive an answer. And one can also imagine that the military would wait to publish such sensitive details, including the details of who might have been on board, before clarifying their status, whether they have been captured, whether they have been deceased. So there are these loved ones to consider, of course, in a matter like this. But we are definitely working on getting those details. And at the moment, we are waiting just as the rest of the country is.
And Janelle, we have to say, when we do look at the broader country, the majority of Americans, they're firmly against this war. 13 American service members have already been killed as a result of Operation Epic Fury. Talk with us about the psychology now of this moment. If indeed an American pilot, or as we might be hearing, there's suggestion that there's actually 2 crew members who are now missing, if they are captured by Iran, what does this mean for Trump and his war? What does this mean for the country?
This is a very interesting question. Of course, one of the key questions at the time. Yes, we could be talking about 2 crew members. An F-15 plane typically has a pilot and a weapons officer in the rear seat. If anything were, of course, to happen to them, there would be predictably a public outcry. Because as we know, this war is very unpopular with the American people. A recent study from the Pew Research Center says that 6 out of 10 Americans disapprove of Trump's handling of the war in Iran. We saw him try to address the American people in a national address this week in order to once again lay out his rationale for entering this war in Iran. And obviously, an incident like this makes the American people harder to convince that this is indeed a just and worthy endeavor. It also puts into question some of the claims that have already been made. A U.S. fighter jet getting shot down over Iran kind of casts into doubt statements from Trump saying that they have decimated the air defenses of Iran's military. If that were the case, the American people might ask, how then has this happened? And obviously, something like this also gives Iran the opportunity to make propaganda out of this. You mentioned earlier that there are now messages being broadcast on Iranian state media calling for a bounty, encouraging people to beat the Americans towards finding those downed crew members. And that would obviously also have a psychological impact on the American people. It might make to them perhaps more clear that the Iranians had more leverage than originally thought and are able to inflict more damage than they had originally thought, or that the president had told them that Iran would be able to do.
Okay, and Janelle, I briefly before we go, I'd also like to just ask you if you can also give us a sense, because this incident is now coming at a time when we have the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reportedly asking General Randy George to step down immediately as Army Chief of Staff. Can you just give us a sense, what is happening right now at the Pentagon in the U.S.?
Indeed. So that was a very specific thing that happens with the Pentagon, and we also reached out to the administration to ask if they could clarify any more details as to why exactly he was made to retire. He said the Pentagon did tell us that they had nothing more to add to that respect, and the Pentagon has, as of yet, not released any kind of public statement as to why Randy George was asked to retire. But we do know that he had strained relations with Secretary Pete Hegseth of the Pentagon, and that this firing comes at a time where they were having a dispute over the promotion of 4 officers on a list of 29. For the purposes of the story, 2 of those officers were black, 2 of them were women. And we know that Secretary Hegseth has railed against diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And Randy George was, of course, against the blocking of these promotions because of what he called these officers' exemplary service. But it goes to show that at the Pentagon, there are a lot of things happening that are not easily explained, that could be, that seem to have more to do with personal relationships, personal vendettas that Pete Hegseth might have. And that just contributes to this picture of chaos at a major arm of the administration at a really, really pivotal time for the country, where it is in fact engaged in the biggest conflict it has been in decades. So that is perhaps a further source of confusion for the American people, how this could be happening at a time like this.
Janelle Dumoulin, thank you so much, Janelle. And we're going to get more on the breaking news with Emma Salisbury. She is Senior Fellow at the National Security Program at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I'd just like to begin by asking you about this U.S. fighter jet downed in Iran. Information seems to indicate 2 crew members now missing, their fate unclear. What do you think is happening right now, and how might a rescue operation be conducted in such a circumstance?
So as I understand it, there are a couple of US Air Force planes conducting a search and rescue operation at the moment. So they will be making circuits over the rough area and seeing if they can see the crew members on the ground, if they have safely ejected from the F-15 that was shot down. If so, they will be able to be picked up by friendly forces. If not, if they have unfortunately not survived, then that will mean that the Iranians have killed 2 US Air Force members by shooting down this plane as well.
What would it have taken to down such a jet?
So the IRGC operates a range of different air defense weapon systems. Some of them are gun-based and some are missile-based. Given the level of destruction in the pictures of the wreckage that have come out, I would have assumed that this was a missile that hit the F-15E. But again, it's very hard to know at the moment because we're only getting pictures from the Iranians thus far.
What kind of training do these crew go through to prepare for a situation like this?
The US Air Force trains its air crews wonderfully to deal with this kind of thing. So hopefully this means that the pilot and the other airmen in the plane will have been able to eject. But it's only possible to do that if they have enough warning of a missile coming their way that is likely to hit them. So if, it was a situation where they either didn't see the missile or didn't have time to eject, that it may be that any training they had wouldn't have been enough to save their lives. But hopefully both of them will have been able to eject and land safely and will hopefully be picked up by the US Air Force.
Emma, there's been some reporting which shows verified video, not the one that we're looking at right now, just to tell our viewers. But there is some reporting that shows video of U.S. aircraft flying low in western Iran, including a refueling aircraft. And I'd like to ask you, if this reporting proves true, why might that be the case, that they were indeed flying low? Isn't that risky?
It is risky, but this is a probably the search and rescue operation itself. So what the US Air Force would have done is to find the nearest planes in the area who can get there as quickly as possible. So it looks like from the footage you mentioned that would be a refueling aircraft and what looks like 2 helicopters. So those 3 assets will be able to start the search and rescue operation as soon as possible because time is of the essence in these kind of things. So that's why you wouldn't normally see a refueling plane doing this kind of mission. But if it was the nearest plane to the area, then it makes sense that it would be doing that. It is risky for these planes to be flying so low over hostile land, but it's very important to the US military that they never leave anyone behind. So if either or both of those 2 aircrew are alive, they will want to find them.
Does the US have dominance in the skies over Iran?
In terms of Air Force, probably yes, because the US Air Force planes are much more capable and much newer than the Iranian Air Force. A lot of the Iranian Air Force has been destroyed already. The problem comes from drones and from missile strikes. So a lot of the damage that we've seen to both aircraft and ships and so on that has been done by the Iranians has all been drones and missiles. So ultimately, no, the US does not have air superiority over Iran. And this is something that I don't think it will be able to achieve anytime soon because the Iranians do have huge stocks of drones and huge stocks of missiles, and they are able to fire those from so many locations within Iran that it is really very difficult to attrit that kind of capability.
You mentioned a little while ago rough terrain when we were talking about where this plane has now been downed. What do we know about the region where the plane went down? We're talking about southern Iran here. How difficult is an operation in this sort of area?
So a lot of southern Iran is very mountainous and a lot of rough terrain. And when you are looking to find 2 human beings in that kind of terrain, that's going to make things really difficult because the rougher the terrain, the more difficult it is to find specific things, and especially something as small as a person. If the 2 aircrew are alive and able to move, that may be easier because they may be able to get to high ground and signal, use a flare or something like that to get the attention of those planes looking for them. If they are injured, they may not be able to do that, which will make things even harder. And if they have unfortunately died, then it will be very, very difficult to find their bodies to bring home.
Can you put this incident now into the bigger picture for us? Because, I mean, we've seen the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran. Now we've seen the counter strikes that Iran has made in the Gulf. It seems as if things are getting worse before they get better. Put this all into the big picture for us, if you would.
I think what this incident really shows is that Iran is not down and out just yet. So the Trump administration has been quite bullish about its destruction of Iranian capabilities, particularly of its naval capabilities. But what this is showing is that Iran doesn't need much more than an air defense system to be able to do serious damage to the US. And to have a US fighter jet, this is an F-15E Strike Eagle, to have that hit and shot down by Iranian air defense is a big win for the Iranians because they can use it both for propaganda purposes, but also to really signal that they are not out of this war yet. So I think what this will mean, especially if the aircrew are not still alive, that this will be a big propaganda win for the Tehran regime. And I think we will probably see them using this a lot in their media for that reason.
Emma Salisbury, Senior Fellow in the National Security Program at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. Thank you so very much for your